Thank you so much, and you are wonderful, and I couldn't think of a better way to start our evening together. So again, I want to thank you for being here tonight. I'm sure that you're all aware that this is 2025, and if you follow the news, the world is in shambles. And ladies and gentlemen, we did not get here by accident. That is why it is so important that we look back and learn about history. If we still have history books left in the libraries, that is. It is history and the repetition of human behavior that can give us a glance of where we are headed. Community Bridge Builders is honored tonight to have here two fabulous speakers that through theirs and their families' life experiences, as well as their work and involvement, will guide us in trying to understand what happened years ago and what is happening now. And speaking about what's happening now, Hiroshi just brought to our attention something that was in the news 2 days ago. I was going to read it to you, but I'll just tell you what it is about. It is about giving the order to the parks to try to make any sign that is not too patriotic go away. That means the encampment center that we're going to be talking about tonight will look, sound, and read very differently. So hopefully, I hope that we can organize a trip to go there because it all looks Pollyannish and we can negate what happened there. I will not introduce them based on their resumes. Yes, they are highly educated and celebrated, but my personal admiration of both of them is their humanism, their caring, their leadership, and their willingness to share themselves and their dreams for the future with us. We will start by listening to Dr. Jay Ryu, then Mr. Hiroshi Yamaguchi will speak. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jai Ryu, or Jay.
And also she talked about the importance of history. I was going to talk about the importance of a few things, but you may add the importance of history to it as well. Well, thank you, the bridge builders of Laguna Woods Village, and thank you all for being here. Rebecca, in discussing how I should prepare for this talk, mentioned three things I remember. One, I should talk about what I do or want to do or what I like to do. And I must also, second, relate that to my life history, personal history. And then third, make it short, within 30 minutes. To prepare for a short talk, I watched North Korean television. Their stories are usually short, always heavily scripted, and if you go off script, you disappear. And nobody will ever know what happened to you until perhaps you defect to South Korea or something like that. But okay, I will start with what I do or what I want to do. What I want to do is much less than what I want to do or what I dream to do, but I do get involved in some things. I am involved with organizations like One Korea Foundation, which I helped found, and I serve as its CEO. And then there's AKUS. It is the America Korea United Society. Its simple, single purpose is to help, defend, to protect, to advance U.S.-ROC, Republic of Korea alliance, which is presently mostly military, and we want to broaden it, expand it to be more cultural and value alliance. And then we are also part of, I'm also part of the group called Global Bridges, something like yours. It's mainly the effort on the part of Christian community of America, many of them evangelists. Their aim is this: North Korean people have scars in their heart. And unless we begin to cure it somehow, that nothing else will really work. And we try to mission to North Korea, Christianize the people of North Korea so that they can help cure their wounds and scars and proceed with the tasks remain for us all after unification. Well, that's what I do, but why do I do that? And what made me do it? That's where I relate to my personal history. I'll give my life history in brief terms. I was born in 1941. 1941 was the year, as you may know, a year that perhaps should never be repeated. Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, invading Soviet Russia. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, December 3rd, 1941. That brought the United States, until then a neutral party in World War II, and declared war on Japanese Empire. And then Germany declared war on US, and Italy declared war, perhaps early next year in 1942. In 1942, in February, I talk a little bit about, my next speaker will talk about, FDR, president then, ordered its Census Bureau director to submit to Oval Office the names and addresses of all Japanese or Americans with Japanese ancestry. And director of the Census Bureau said, "No, Mr. President, we cannot do that because we promised the American people the confidentiality of census information." FDR fired him. I think his name was Mr. Keeler, and another appointee carried out the, he also was hesitant. So Japanese Americans were identified. The order was given as was read by Rebecca, but it was done without the help of the Census Bureau. It's just one little footnote of the event. Well, it was 1941. In 1945, in August, Korea was liberated from colonial status under Japanese Empire. And it was on Hiroshima was August 6th, and August 9th, Joseph Stalin of Soviet Union declared war on Japan. And they came through Manchuria, and by the end of August already, they were crossing the Yalu River that borders 3 provinces of China, which together is called Manchuria. There was hardly any resistance. The Soviets just simply walked through without having any major battles. So I was born in North Korea in a city called Hamhung. To this day, it's the second largest city in North Korea next to Pyongyang. And I don't remember much of this time because I just got through toilet training. And it was early 1947. I think I was 5 years old. And my mother and my younger sister, 3 of us followed my father with 2 oldest brother and my grandmother, who was already in Seoul. And why do I talk about this? If I talk about every details and steps, it will take too much time to do it, and I get too emotional about this. But anyway, I don't remember much of it at that time. I don't think I experienced much, except I was waiting in a long line, and my mother told me that if we have to wait here a long time, you will have to go take pee. And when you go, you have to come right back because I may not be where you left. So I remember just running, and then after a pee and coming back to my mother, who was always a few steps ahead of her previous position. But I will not tell other things related to this story. But what is important to me is it was 90% probable that we could not leave North Korea and cross the 38th parallel, which was drawn after Stalin came through Manchuria. By the way, one historical note was when Stalin's Red Army came down to Korean Peninsula so fast that Americans were concerned that if left alone, Soviets would conquer the entire peninsula. So Dean Rusk, who served as the Secretary of State under John F. Kennedy's administration later, was a colonel in the United States in the Pentagon. And one official in the State Department drew a 38th parallel and told Stalin that come to Korean Peninsula, that's okay, but stop at the 38th parallel. So Korea, that's been one country for thousands of years until this moment, 38th parallel was drawn, and the country has been divided since then. 80 years passed here in year 2025. The August 15 this year is the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation and the division, a great blessing coupled with curse of an 80-year division. So that's what happened. And it was long after that this event in hindsight and some reflections and some things I heard, mostly from defectors, how North Koreans live today. Then this experience was brought back, and I began to feel guilty that I could have been one of them. It was 80–90% probable that I would perhaps not be able to leave North Korea and still be there and living, or already dead most likely, a kind of life North Korean people are forced to live. It is one history's largest open-air prison. One has, one thing about human rights is that we've seen horror stories already. We've seen heard of Holocaust. We have internment of Japanese American citizens. We have seen a lot of horror stories. But the kind of life North Koreans are living is without parallel, without precedent. There will never be anything like it in the future either, because it's unimaginable. I have about 20 books written by defectors about how they escaped life in political prison, how they were brought there, how they lived, and how they survived and how they escaped. The stories, you cannot finish the book without at least wetting a few pages with your own tears. That's how horrible, just incredible. If I were to mention it, you'll be so depressed, it'll be difficult for you to drive back in safety. That's how horrible it is. But anyway, that's how my personal experience relates to what I do. And I lived in Korea since then. Of course, I should also mention Korean War. In 1950, I was in second grade. I was age 9, about to become 9 years old, in 1950, when North Korea pushed through the 38th parallel and moved almost to the entire length of peninsula, except the Nakdonggang premise on the southeast corner of South Korea, where Americans came. And one word about General MacArthur, who was the commander of the 8th Army, who came to rescue Korea, is to fight for freedom, there's no substitute for victory. It was a famous word he said, and a lot of Koreans today say, remember, and are grateful. And the kind of words we should remember. There's no compromise. There can be no negotiation. There's no dialogue possible with North Korea. Only victory is possible. Not necessarily military, though. We want to hope to accomplish it through peaceful means. Victory is possible without bloodshed, I hope. And then the Korean War, 1950. I was too young again to remember. We talk about how Koreans experienced the Korean War, and we were kids and we didn't really experience the war like the 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, like the way my father and mother and my relatives experienced it. But I still know what war was like. I saw a lot of dead bodies, the blood on the streets, and heard stories you heard about Kangaroo Court, how some people were stoned to death in the public square in the city of everywhere in South Korea. There are a lot of heinous massacres took place. I must say, in honesty, by both sides. But in some areas, the kind of things the North Korean occupiers did in Korea is, again, a horror story that is too cruel, too horrible to repeat here. And I lived through, from that war until 1964, that covers all my elementary, middle, high, and high school, the college years. In 1964, I came to America, and this year, my stay in America is 61 years, passing 환갑 in Korean, counting. In this talk, I want to emphasize the importance of a few things. The importance of freedom. I have been a Buddhist almost all my life until early this year. This year I decided, with the help of a few people, to accept, to answer the call of Jesus Christ. Amen. And so importance of freedom, I think, is if you read between the lines in the Bible, I think the very essence of Christianity, Jesus' teaching, is freedom. Without turning to Jesus, we just observe how human beings are different from others, non-humans. We walk on 2 feet. We have 2 eyes pulled to the cross, more designed to focus than see the distance. We have a lot of physical features that are distinct and unique, and capacity to think and reason and feel. We're different from cows and goats and lions. We're very different. But one most important way, we are different from them because we were told we cannot survive without making choices. Choice-making animal is that human beings are. To make a choice, good choice, right choice, you have to be free. So whenever human beings are created, I think Creator had in mind that this creature will live free. We're born free, live free, and die free. And he didn't turn to magic or mystery or authority to ask his believers to come to him. He said, just follow my words and follow the truth. And that's the word of freedom. So importance of freedom is important. And freedom, in another word, liberty, is often interchangeably used, especially in ordinary English, I think. Freedom is more individual. It's like a natural state of freedom that I mentioned. Unconstrained, without any restraints about my exercise of my personal freedom. I do make my choices about my job, whom to marry, what kind of place I want to live, with whom to live, and so on. That's freedom. But liberty is a little more structured. It makes sense in terms of some system, governance, society. So it is some collective property in the word liberty. Like Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death, mentions the government allowed freedom. That's liberty. So that's why we have to come, when you talk about liberty and freedom, you have to talk about government as well. So that spells the importance of country. You think about yourself, it's not just my life, everyone's life. Depends on mainly 3 elements. Ourselves, myself, my own dreams, my own capacities, my own limits, my own character and abilities. And second is my family, into which I was born. T.S. Eliot said, family is where one starts from. Everyone starts from some kind of family. And then the country. The country is the broadest framework within which we live through our lives. Some of us are a little different because many of us are immigrants to this country. But here's one thing that I wanted to mention. The people of Laguna Woods Village, like you and me, came from all different walks of life, with different occupation, different places we used to live, different kinds of religion we believed in, different in where we lived or what we followed. But we have something in common. I think we are more or less belong to the same generation. I was born in 1941, as I said. When I think of my generation, are usually people who were born somewhere between 1930, who would be 95 this year, to about 1965, who will be about 70 this year. Most of you are in between that category, are you not? So, although we experience different things in different places, but we share the same time. So we have some kind of link here, some sort of generational bridge building, and we don't have to cross much because we already are there. And our generation experienced, my experience in Korea, my experience in America, will somehow a little bit resonate with you, and I hope that this time will not be a total waste of time. You take a few pieces away from it, and again, if you forget everything else I mentioned, please be renewed in your confidence that how important freedom is. And freedom and liberty is something worth fighting for, worth protecting. And then importance of your family and country. When we say family and country are important to us, we're talking about also what kind of family, what kind of country will pass on to our posterity. Yeah. Okay, so we share the same. I'll talk about Korea and America. In Korea, in 1964, when I left, income per capita was $100. Korea was listed among the poorest of all in the world. It was about 65% of Korean government's national annual budget was United States assistance. Without the United States taxpayers' help, there would be no police in the police station. There would be no cops, no judges, no school teachers could be paid for their work. Thank America for all that help. But you know what Korea has become. Korea is today arguably 10th largest economy. Russia often falls behind us. Some year, one ahead of us, one little behind. Russia might be, South Korea, United States of America, in terms of its land size, I once calculated, is 126 times the size of South Korea. Maybe it is about 300 times Russia, it's bigger. But economically, we are neck and neck with Russia. Technologically, culturally, in many other ways, Korea has been a model for many. After World War II was over, many underdeveloped countries that became independent wanted to chart a course what kind of nation our country will become. Many countries chose the communist way. North Korea is the most prominent of them here. And of course, the India, Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the prime minister of India for many, many years, and his daughter and his grandson have been India's prime minister, have been running democracy, often called the largest democracy, but it was pretty communistic in economic institutions and social policies. Only after the Gandhi family left the political scene, India has become some clout, some money to buy maintain adequate living standard. Sukarno of Indonesia belonged to a non-aligned society. And many other cases, Ho Chi Minh of North Vietnam, Chu Enlai of China, and even people like Tito of Yugoslavia, the people who had a little bit of a choice whether to turn communist or otherwise, all turned the left way. Only Korea's Syngman Rhee, our president, who believed in democracy, who believed in American friendship, established the Republic of Korea in 1948, 2 years before the Korean War broke out. So President Syngman Rhee was very old, and he was actually kicked out of his office in 1960 when I was a college freshman. And I also took part in the demonstration. I deeply regret it. I didn't know any better. I was so dumb. I just was blindsided by many other things. But Korea, succeeding President Syngman Rhee was a military coup in 1961. President Park Chung-hee, who was called dictator in many ways, circles, and he was succeeded by something close to a military dictator. But again, I didn't like him. I demonstrated against him. I voiced my opinions against him. I again regret it. He was a great president. You know, in hindsight, as we become a little older, like you and me, we know better. No democracy is possible when people are hungry. Democracy is possible only when you have something close to a middle class. People who have something to lose if the country goes berserk. Without the middle class, Korea in 1945, when Korea was liberated and divided, was not only very poor, but was a society of something of antiquity. It was a corrupt society. It was a very status dictated society. Poor people who ranked low in social status had really little or no hope. You know, and out of these ashes of that kind of background, and also the ashes of the Korean War, how did they pull through to accomplish so much? I attribute this success to 3 causes. One, the most important is US-ROC alliance. Because of the guaranteed United States help, South Korea could concentrate on economic development to make their living standards grow. The second reason is many Korean friends may not agree with me here, but I think the proximity, Korea being close to Japan, was the second most important cause of Korea's revival. Because we didn't have to travel to Europe to learn technology. We didn't have to go that far. We only have to cross the small strait to Japan. And Japanese were good teachers to us after World War II. Many Koreans will resent me for saying this, but that, I think, is God-proven truth. How do I continue from here? In spite of it all, because of that sort of attitude, resentment against the dictatorship, which is not really a dictator. Usually dictators are people who repress people to maintain their political power, right? Usually, without exception, dictators are people who, after their dictatorship is over, make sure they have later good life. They run corrupt and become very rich after retirement. You see that many cases like that in Southeast Asia and nearly all of Africa and Middle East as well. None of these 2 presidents, Syngman Rhee and Park Chung-hee, were dictators of that kind. They all, when their term ended, the presidency became pretty dirt-free, pocket full of nothing. They were poor. President Syngman Rhee died lonely, without any help, in exile in Hawaii in 1965, 5 years after he was exiled. President Park was assassinated at a dinner time. But anyway, that's the way we treated our great leaders. But you cannot save somebody in hindsight. So I regret, and I hope God forgives me. Since 1987, time has come. I will try to make it short. 5 minutes? One thing I have to say about Korea is Korea today is in deep danger, a dire strait. Korea, whether you believe it or not, is in impending danger of becoming a communist society in relatively short time. It's not that far-fetched story. You may find it unbelievable that I say this, but President of South Korea, who was elected through fraudulent election in June 3rd this year, only less than 2 months ago. Think of American troops in South Korea as occupiers. And he thinks he has been found to smuggle to Kim Jong-un $8 million, which is helping his nuclear program. And he is a culprit in 5 criminal charges still pending, which he said, while I'm president, I excuse myself from trial. So he's free from that. But his forces are coupled with lopsided Congress, where 190 seats out of 300 seats are occupied by his party. Judiciary of South Korea is entirely in ironclad held by this president. South Korea can run any which way course that we fear if this man is somehow allowed to do it. I think the probability of this happening is at present a lot greater than not happening. This is something else I say about America. When I came to America in 1964, it was a country where people seemed to walk tall, proud of their country. They thought of themselves as the victors against Hitler, Mussolini, Hirohito. And they were proud of it. They saved the world from 2 devastating wars. And they were proud of it. A lot of people, leaders of the country, were respected, admired. I remember how I talked to people when I was going to school in Minnesota, spoke with great reverence about Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois, how they talked about Pat Brown of California, how they talked to, there was a lot of, nobody questioned the integrity of the court. Today, Americans don't seem to walk so tall. They seem to see they're wrong, what's wrong with America, a lot faster than what's right about America. And many of us seem shamed of America. And America has done some things, but America, to me, is still the greatest country in the world, and worth saving, and worth defending and upholding. I think we should renew ourselves to do it. Otherwise, it is possible that we may lose the country.
Thank you, Dr. Ryu. And now I want to introduce you to our next guest. Let me tell you something that probably not all of you are aware of or have been feeling. Some of us are fearful, but we don't show it. And the little story that I have for you, the first time when I met my new friend, we met at my house. And when he entered, he shared the following. He said, as I was driving to your house, I was very fearful. Excuse me? Fearful of what? He said, I didn't know what could I say or not say in front of you. Once he got to my house and he saw everything that is hanging on my door, he relaxed. But that's something that we don't think about, that now we have to prepare in advance. What can we say and what can we not say? When do we need to be careful and when it's okay to be ourselves? And for me, probably also for you, that's a new reality. So I don't want to tell you what he feels or thinks. I want him to tell you what he is living. Please, Mr. Hiroshi.
Thank you, Dr. Ryu, for your message of hope for the unification of Korea. That is certainly an admirable vision that reminds me that most anything is possible. Good evening, I'm Hiroshi Yamaguchi, a Japanese-American sansei, meaning that I am of the generation that was born here, and so were both of my parents. I'm going to read from my script, not because I know this story well enough, because I want to get through this. A lot of it is going to be painful. Our history as Japanese Americans largely began in the 1880s on the heels of the anti-Chinese movement and the Yellow Peril rhetoric, becoming the next wave of cheap labor. It is a long and complex story of immigration, hardship, prejudice, resilience, rebuilding, and today, success and recognition for our contributions to American society. This evening, there is only time to share about a small but very important part of our history that connects to what is going on in our country today. It is about what Americans did to other Americans on American soil, rounding up and imprisoning all people of Japanese ancestry living on the West Coast, tossing aside every basic constitutional right. This mass incarceration was the result of wartime hysteria, fueled in large part by a lack of political leadership, false information, racism, sensationalized propaganda, and greed. Does that rhyme with what is going on right now? I want to warn you, I rewrote this script today. It is not as nice and as whitewashed as it was. Granted, there are some different words used today, like gaslighting, the deep state, cheap fakes, the swamp, wokeness, etc. But these same tactics have so many similarities to what was used against us Japanese Americans around World War II. With the power of social media, the rhetoric today is likely even more dangerous. In contemporary terms, this is called the othering of a group of people, and I am here this evening to shed some light on the similarities between then and now. Importantly, I do want to honor all of my relatives and the over 125,000 who were wrongfully incarcerated. So in addition to touching on a bit of history, I will also share a few of their stories. Although I am fortunate to have been spared by one generation the trauma of being forced to exchange my home and livelihood for an imprisonment camp, I vicariously experienced the shattered lives and the broken spirits of my ancestors through their untold stories. In the aftermath of this atrocious chapter in our history, we Japanese Americans kept quiet for decades in our efforts to assimilate and prove our loyalty as good Americans. Looking back on my life, I realize that I've walked an internal tightrope, being as Japanese as possible to honor my family and heritage, and as American as possible, trying to dispel the forever foreign trope that is placed upon us Asian Americans, no matter how long we've been here. Those of us Asian Americans here tonight likely know all about this. Sometime in my 40s, I realized that a shift began to occur inside, providing an opening to begin acknowledging the Japanese part of me, along with my American identity. More recently, I finally took the leap and reclaimed the original name given to me by my grandparents, who raised me till I was about 7. I have since set aside the English name I went by for 60 years. This shift has led me to a greater curiosity and deeper appreciation of the many differences between people, cultures, and communities that reflect back and accentuate our even greater similarities. Growing up, I only had a vague idea about what happened to my relatives around World War II. They did not openly talk about what happened to them, yet it was a touchstone that clearly demarcated their lives. Before camp and after camp were two different realities that I could sense even through their studied attempts to hide it from us. I suppose it was their way to try and spare us and themselves from the pain, indignity, and shame of looking like the enemy. They used two phrases to sum up their experience: shakata ga nai, meaning it cannot be helped, and gamen, to endure and carry on with dignity. Although the scars resulting from what happened are indelible on the whole Japanese American community, we somehow emerged becoming the model minority through our bootstrap success in many areas of our life. This has turned out to be a mixed blessing that is sometimes used to pit us against other racial groups, and that is a topic for another discussion. It was only in the final seasons of my mother's life that she was able to share with me a few memories of what she and her family went through. Her family operated a small produce stand in Turlock, California, and the whole family helped on the farm before and after school, while they weren't studying, of course. While she did work at the stand, she remembers her relatives being robbed repeatedly with no response from the police. She remembers being told the story of a boarding house that one of her uncles operated, and one night, white raiders stormed in and forced all of the laborers onto a truck. No one knew where they were taken or what happened to them. Initially, her family was taken to live at the county fairgrounds in Merced, California, for a few months until the camp they were being sent to was being built. Suddenly, her family lost their identity when they were issued tags with a number to be attached to each piece of luggage and to be worn on their outer clothing. Names became numbers when her family became 1873 and she became 2346. She clearly remembers the stench of the horse stall they were forced to live in. She remembered the trauma of being herded onto a train with armed guards at both ends of each car and blacked out windows as they traveled to an unknown destination that turned out to be the Amachi camp located in a bleak desert in southeast Colorado. Because the trains had no toilets, it would stop on occasion so they could relieve themselves. Because they were forbidden to step more than 5 feet from the train, they suffered the indignity of relieving themselves in full view of the armed guards and others. Worse, every time the train stopped, they feared they would just be left in the desert as their punishment. When they arrived at camp, she was scared to see the barbed wire fences and guard towers with the guns and searchlights facing inward. The total lack of privacy in the latrines with no partitions and communal showers was so humiliating. And then there was the chronic indigestion from the foods such as brined liver and greasy mutton stew that resulted in frantic trips to the latrine. Everyone had no idea how long they would be imprisoned. Recently, I attended the pilgrimage to Manzanar, where all of my father's family was sent, and heard many stories from those who were imprisoned there. If you have not visited Manzanar, I recommend that you visit soon for reasons I will not go into right now. One man described the terror when his father was suddenly hauled away and his family did not know where he was taken or if they would ever see him again. In the immediate aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the FBI arrested over 1,200 Japanese immigrant men, mainly community leaders, businessmen, Japanese language school teachers, and religious figures. This was part of a larger effort where over 5,500 Japanese men were jailed in DOJ prison camps that were separate from the 10 more well-known camps. This was carried out without a shred of due process, and is another example that we were at war not just with an enemy nation, but with an enemy race. One man described feelings of despair and humiliation as they watched Caucasians swarming like vultures over their belongings, offering such pitiful amounts, knowing they had no recourse but to accept whatever was offered because their family had only 4 days to dispose of their business, home, and all of their belongings. They had no idea what the future would hold for them. He told of a neighboring homeowner in despair carrying a can of gasoline, wanting to burn their house down, but his wife tried to stop him by pleading that maybe someone could use their home. She begged him not to do it because they were civilized people, not savages. And being a dog lover, this one really got to me. The story of a woman sharing about the painful memory for when she was a young girl of having to abandon their family dog, Lucky, since they were not allowed to bring any pets with them. Another woman reluctantly shared about the trauma of using the latrines. Anytime after dark, if she needed to use the latrine, a searchlight from one of the guard towers shone on her, and sometimes a male guard would enter the latrine under the guise of protection. This happened anytime, day or night, so she always made sure that someone else accompanied her. As she shared this, she was brought to tears from her memory of feeling so ashamed and violated by the people who were supposed to be protecting her. On a positive note, I do want to share a couple of stories from those at Manzanar in their efforts to make the best of the difficulties they faced. 2 Japanese cultural traditions helped them survive life in a prison camp. The first concept of on denotes the lifelong obligations of every citizen to their government and their ancestors. The second is giri, or the dignity of one's name. It means, in essence, a deep sense of self-respect that comes from accepting whatever circumstance, no matter how difficult or humiliating, with grace and honor. The message from these traditions was reflected in a pleasure garden that was created in the middle of Manzanar, a beautiful style Japanese garden around the only running water in the camp was built by the residents, and it also included picnic grounds, a ball field, and a stage for both live performances and recorded programs over the public address system they built. After less than 6 months of chaotic leadership by the initial camp director, Director Merritt was brought in, and through his more enlightened leadership, life at Manzanar greatly improved. It seems life at Manzanar was significantly more humane compared to the other 9 camps that stretched all the way east to Arkansas. It goes to show what a difference a compassionate person in power can make. Another aspect of Japanese-American history during World War II is the 442nd Regimental Combat Team that was formed by Nisei soldiers who volunteered to fight for their country to try and prove their loyalty both at home and in the battlefield. They fought primarily in Italy, southern France, and Germany, and received the distinction of the most decorated unit for its size and length of service in U.S. military history. One of my uncles belonged to this unit, so, ironically, he was fighting for the same country that was imprisoning his family behind barbed wire. As I learned what happened to my own parents, grandparents, and all of my aunts and uncles, I am appalled and saddened. Looking at their lives and the lives of other Japanese Americans who were targeted, I am outraged by what our society and government put them through. They experienced being disrespected, distrusted, and even hated for the crime of having the face of what looked like the enemy. Beginning in late 1945, when the camps began closing, they were given $25 and a train ticket to go back to a home that for most no longer existed. Today, more than ever, it is so important to remember the story of what happened as we enter a time in history that seems all too familiar. Unfortunately, it seems like our administration is determined to take us back, leading us away from our democratic principles. I will close with the story of hope that my mother shared with me about their German neighbors, the Myers, as she recalled, in Turlock, California, that took care of their farm and stored their belongings during the time they were sent off to camp. Maybe the family knew that if the government had treated the German and Italian immigrants, not to mention German and Italian Americans, like the Japanese and Japanese Americans, they would also have been locked up. Although we were at war with these nations, the blanket exclusion orders only applied to Japanese aliens and non-aliens. When my mother's family was released from camp, they were fortunate to be able to return to their farm in Turlock. Sadly, however, they also returned to find the barn that stored their belongings looted and burned, so very little remains from before camp. This Japanese rice press that my mother gave me was passed down from her mother and is one of the very few remaining things from before camp. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a bit about this story of challenge and hope. Our communities have been targeted before, and we know too well how this story could turn out. As we bear witness to past wrongs, we say never again. We stand in solidarity with those most deeply affected to try and ensure that democracy endures, that civil rights are respected, and that justice prevails. It is a tall order, but that is part of what it means to be Japanese American. That is what it means to be truly American. In gratitude, Hiroshi.